All right, chapter 36. When we left Odd, he had Fungus Man's body in the back seat and was tooling down the road, getting ready to dump it somewhere where it would be found, but not too soon, to keep him from uh, getting picked up and not being able to impact whatever bad thing was getting ready to happen. So, here we go, chapter 36. The Church of the Whispering Comet had erected more than The Church of the Whispering Comet had been erected more than 20 years ago, off the state highway and a few hundred yards past the town limits of Pico Mundo, on a tract of desert scrub. Even when it had been a house of unusual worship, it had not resembled a church. Here in the clear and starry night, the main building, a 200-foot long, 60-foot wide, semi-cylindrical, corrugated metal Quonset hut with porthole windows, looked like a spaceship, minus its nose cone, half buried in the earth. Nestled among dead and dying trees, more than half concealed by a mottling camouflage of shadows and pale moonlight, smaller Quonsets ringed the perimeter of the property. These had been barracks for the true believers. The founder of the church, Caesar Zed Jr., preached that he received whispered messages, mostly in dreams, but also sometimes when awake, from alien intelligences aboard a spacecraft traveling towards Earth inside a comet. These aliens claimed to be the gods who had created human beings and all species on the planet. Most people in Pico Mundo had assumed that the services at the Church of the Whispering Comet would one day culminate in a communion with poison Kool-Aid and hundreds of deaths. Instead, the sincerity of Zed's religious faith came under question when he and his entire clergy were indicted and convicted of operating the largest ecstasy production and distribution ring in the world. After the church ceased to exist, an outfit calling itself the First Amendment Protection Society, Inc., the largest operator of adult bookstores, topless bars, internet porn sites, and karaoke cocktail lounges in the United States, intimidated Maravilla County into giving it a business license. They remade the property into a cheesy sex-theme amusement park, converting the original church sign to neon and extending it to read Church of the Whispering Comet Topless Bar, Adult Bookstore, and Burger Heaven. Rumor has it that the burgers and fries were excellent, and that the promise of free soft drink refills was generously honored. Yet this establishment never succeeded in winning over the family dining crowd, or the upscale professional couples who are so essential to any restaurant operation. The enterprise, known locally as the Whispering Burger, turned a handsome profit even after covering its food service losses. The topless bar, the bookstore, which stocked no books but offered thousands of videotapes, and the whorehouse, not mentioned in the original business license application, brought oceans of money to this desert oasis. Although the corporation's lawyers, courageous defenders of the Constitution, managed to keep the doors open through 10 convictions for operation of a prostitution ring, the Whispering Burger imploded following the gunning down of 3 prostitutes by a naked customer strung out on PCP and excessive doses of Viagra. In lieu of unpaid taxes and fines, the property had fallen into the hands of the county. During the past 5 years, cessation of all maintenance and the relentless repossession efforts of the desert had reduced a once proud house of alien gods to rust and ruin. The church grounds had been landscaped as a tropical paradise, with lush lawns, several varieties of palm trees, ferns, bamboo, and flowering vines. Without daily watering, the brief rainy season in the desert wasn't sufficient to preserve this Eden. Having switched off my headlights when I turned in from the state highway, I drove through the shaggy moon shadows cast by dead palm trees. The cracked and potholed blacktop driveway led to the back of the main building, and then further to the arc of smaller Quonset huts. I was reluctant to leave the car with the engine running, but I wanted to be able to make a quick getaway. Without keys, I could not start the engine quickly enough in a crisis. With the flashlight I packed in my shopping bag, I set out to find a suitable place to stash an inconvenient corpse. The Mojave had recovered its breath again. A lazy exhalation blew out of the east, smelling of dry brush, hot sand, and the strange life of the desert. Each of the 10 Quonset huts used as barracks by the church had housed 60 cult members in the cramped fashion of opium den bunks. When the church was replaced by a bordello with burgers, a few of those structures were gutted, partitioned, and redecorated to serve as cozy cribs for the hookers who delivered what the topless dancers in the bar only promised. In the years since the property had been abandoned, morbidly curious people had explored and vandalized the main building and all the barracks. Doors had been broken open, some had fallen off their corroded hinges. At the third barracks that I inspected, the spring latch on the door still worked well enough to hold it closed. I didn't want to leave the corpse in a space to which coyotes could easily gain access. Robertson had been a monster. I remained convinced of that. However, regardless of what he might have done or might have been capable of doing, I couldn't consign his remains to the indignity that Granny Sugars had feared might befall her if she dropped dead in a poker game with hard-hearted players. Maybe coyotes weren't carrion eaters. Maybe they would only eat meat they killed. The desert, however, teemed with more life than could be seen at casual inspection. Much of it would be pleased to dine on a carcass as fleshy as Robertson's. After pulling the Chevy as close to the chosen building as possible, about 10 feet from the door, I required a minute to summon the nerve to deal with the corpse. I chewed 2 antacid tablets. During the drive from town, Bob Robertson had not once asked, "Are we there yet?" Nevertheless, and against all reason, I didn't trust him to stay dead. Hauling him out of the car proved easier than getting him into it, except that at one point, when his big, gelatinous body quivered inside the bedsheet shroud, I felt as if I were handling a bag full of live snakes. After I dragged him to the door of the Koontz hut, which I had wedged open with a flashlight, I paused to wipe the sweat from my dripping brow, and saw the yellow eyes. Low to the ground, 20 or 30 feet away, they watched me with unmistakable hunger. I snatched up the flashlight and focused the beam on the very thing I had feared. A coyote that had come in from the open range, exploring among the abandoned buildings. Big, sinewy, rough-hewn, sharp of brow and jaw, it was less wicked by nature than are many human beings, but at that moment it looked like a demon that had slipped through the gates of hell. The flashlight didn't frighten it off, which suggested that it had become dangerously certain of itself in the presence of people, and that it might not be alone. I swept the immediate night with the flashlight and discovered another slouching beast to the right of and behind the first. Until recent years, coyotes rarely savaged children and never adults. As human settlements encroached on their hunting grounds, they had become bolder, more aggressive. Within the past 5 years, several adults in California had been stalked and even attacked. These two didn't appear to find me in the least bit intimidating, only savory. I searched the ground near my feet, seeking a stone, and settled for a chunk of concrete that had broken off the edge of the walkway. I hurled it at the nearest predator. The missile struck the blacktop 6 inches wide of the target and bounced away into the darkness. The coyote shied from the point of impact but not run. The second stalker took its cue from the first and stood its ground. The wheeze and clatter of the idling car, which didn't faze the coyotes, worried me. Whispering Burger was an isolated property. No one should have been near enough to have his curiosity pricked by the grumbling engine. If other intruders were already on the grounds, however, the noise would mask the sound of their movements. I couldn't deal with 2 things at once. Getting the corpse out of sight took precedence over dealing with the coyotes. By the time I returned, maybe the predators would have gone, led away by the scent of rabbits or other easy game. I dragged the wrapped cadaver across the threshold into the Koontz hut, and then closed the door securely behind me. A hallway along one side of the building served a bath and 4 rooms. Each room had been the workplace of a prostitute. My flashlight revealed dust, spider webs, 2 empty beer bottles, a litter of dead bees. After all these years, the air was still thinly laced with the faded bouquet of scented candles, incense, perfume, fragrant oils. Underlying this faint but sweet melange was a fainter, acrid smell that might have been the stale urine of animals that had come and gone. The furniture had been trucked away long ago. In 2 rooms, mirrors on the ceiling suggested where the beds had been positioned. The walls were painted hot pink. Each room featured 2 portholes. Most of the glass had been shot out by kids with air guns. In the 4th room, both small windows were intact. Here, none of the larger carrion eaters could get at the corpse. One of the securing shoelaces had snapped. An end of the shroud sagged loose, and Robertson's left foot became exposed. I considered taking both laces in the sheet. They were possible connections to me, though they were such common brands sold in so many stores that they alone would not convict me. As I bent to the task, into my mind came an image of the wound in Robertson's chest, and in memory I heard my mother's voice, "You want to pull the trigger for me? You want to pull the trigger?" I'd had much practice turning my mind away from certain memories of my childhood. I could quickly dial her remembered voice from a whisper to silence. Casting from my mind the image of Robertson's wound was not as easy. That wet hole pulsed in memory as though his dead heart were beating under it. In my bathroom, when I'd opened his shirt to check for lividity and had seen the entrance wound in the empurpled flesh, something had compelled me to look more closely. Disgusted by my own morbid impulse and indeed frightened by it, afraid that my fascination proved I'd been twisted by my mother in ways I hadn't realized. I had resisted looking closer and had at once turned away, rebuttoning his shirt. Now, on one knee beside Robertson, fumbling with the knots in the remaining shoelaces that secured the shroud, I tried to close my memory of that shirt over the memory of the oozing wound, but still it throbbed in my mind's eye. In the bloating cadaver, gas swizzled up a series of chuckles, culminating in what sounded like a sigh from the lips of the dead man, there behind his cotton veil. Unable to spend another second with the corpse, I shot to my feet, fled the hot pink room with my flashlight, and was halfway along the hall before I realized that I had left the door open. I went back and closed it, further protecting the body from the desert's larger scavengers. I used the tail of my t-shirt to wipe the door handles to all the rooms that I'd investigated. Then, scuffing my feet through the prints I'd left earlier, I smeared the thick dust on the floor with the hope that I could avoid leaving clear shoe tread impressions. When I opened the outer door, my flashlight beam struck flares of eyeshine from 3 coyotes that waited between me and the idling Chevy. There you go. That was chapter 36. See you next time.